And welcome to the review in A Course of Love of chapter 14 of the third treatise. And the title of this chapter is Not Other Than Who You Are. Transitioning from the thought system of fear to the thought system of love is what we're going to talk about in this chapter. And of course, in the previous chapters, we talked about how we're going to live as the higher self, the capital S self in this world. And this is a really important concept on how to do that. So he starts by saying, even though your beliefs are changing, a pattern of behaving fearfully may remain. Verse 1 tells us, as long as these patterns of fear remain as deterrents to action, you will not experience the freedom of living from the new thought system. So you might have the new thought system, but you won't be living from there, and you just won't be progressing the way that you want to. You may have a more peaceful and meaningful life, but you won't bring the new thought system into your physical experience, and you won't live as the Christ. So that's the big deal here. We're not just being asked to have a more comfortable life, to have a new thought system so that we can process what happens to us in a more effective way. We are being asked to live as the Christ on earth. And in order for that to happen, we have to switch the way that we're thinking and the way that we're experiencing this life. Because remember, we're sourcing all of our experience. So in order to change the effects, we have to go back and change the root of it. So let's go on. So what happens when you have a new thought system but you don't live the new thought system? Well, this is really descriptive of what I think a lot of us have experienced. So the first thing that happens is you'll begin to believe in benevolence and abundance. You start to think, yeah, maybe the universe really is good. Maybe my life really is good. And at this stage of the game, if you've been through A Course of Love so far, I'm sure that's something that you're experiencing. There's good all around you and abundance. You start to recognize, wow, this is what I have. I have everything I need in this moment. So you start to really believe in those concepts. And then you'll translate your ideas of scarcity into abundance and ideas of blame into benevolence. So instead of thinking about what happened to you when you were 12 and you were the victim, you start translating that to think, well, if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have done this and I wouldn't be here. So you start to sort of see the synchronicity in the things that have happened to you and let go of your victimhood. And then what happens when you do that in number 3 is that you'll start to accept your status and cope with discomfort. So you start to go, well, everything that happened to me that I thought was bad in the past was actually for my highest good. So I'm going to trust that this hurt finger that I just experienced is for my highest good, and I'm just going to cope with it. And as a result of that, you'll feel more peace and joy in your life. These are all really positive things that we're enjoying in this moment. But then we move into number 4. Your fragile state of peace will feel threatened by a person or a situation. So you're feeling all happy and calm and peaceful, and yeah, it's a good world, and I'm not a victim. And you go out in public and something happens, someone's mean to you, someone cuts you off, you get a fender bender, you overdraw your bank balance, whatever it is, something comes along and it threatens you and you don't feel peaceful anymore. Because what happens, move to number 5, is you'll judge your situation as bad. Like, oh man, I really didn't need to experience that right now. And you will look for someone or something to blame, because that's our instinctual go-to when we think something bad has happened, something wrong. We want to know who's responsible. Well, you can see this play out in the news all the time. Whenever there's anything except weather, and usually they'll try to find somebody to blame for how they coped with the weather. there's got to be somebody to blame for why that plane went down, or why this happened, or why that happened. We're just not happy until we can put the blame on somebody, and then we can move on. Now, number 6 happens, thankfully. You will eventually return to equanimity because you won't be able to tolerate it for long. Whereas maybe before, you used to be able to live in the world of everybody's out to get me. I can blame these people for this or that. You can't live there anymore. You've had a taste of peace and joy, and you will return to equanimity. So thankfully, that will happen. And number 7, you'll look back in hindsight and be able to see truth. Like, oh, okay, so that happened to me, and as a result I experienced this, and I can see that that was actually good for me. So, oh yeah, that really was benevolent, even though it didn't look like it. Okay, so that's kind of the process that we live in when we don't live the new thought system, but we do believe it. So many of us are there, but that's not good enough. Sorry. It's not good enough, not because you're doing it wrong. It's not good enough for you. You deserve more than that. You deserve a richer life than that. You deserve to not be threatened, that your fragile state of peace to not be threatened. You need to have your whole heart and your whole life and your whole experience opened wide up. It's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because there's more. Verse 3, once the translation of the new thought system for the old is complete, this will no longer happen. But the translation cannot be completed if you refuse to live by what you know, if you refuse to live as who you are. So once again, we're going back to, you got to live this in the world. You have to test this and see if it isn't true. So he does give us a solution, and that is you would not be other than who you are. So that's the recognition. Okay, you created yourself very intentionally. You chose your setup, and you're choosing it in every moment. And these choices are intentional, not to give you a hard time, but because they truly are your highest good, and you love who you are. In other words, acknowledge that you really want the life you're living. You want this life. You chose it. You're choosing it every minute. Open yourself up to it and receive its gifts. Stop comparing your life now with the way your life used to be or the way you think your life should be. Stop comparing your experience to those of your friends or people that you know, how, you just don't live in as nice a house, or you don't have as much freedom, or you don't have the right partner, or whatever. You chose this. You wouldn't be other than who you are because it's what you want. And when you really embrace that, and really understand that, of all the choices I could have had, I chose this because I want this. And now you turn to the juice of this moment and this experience and love whatever's coming up for you. Yeah, your whole world opens up. And verse 6 tells us, as you see newly with the eyes of love, you will be much more likely to see love everywhere within the life you currently live. So it's really what it's talking about is loving what comes up for you. You are in your own hologram, living your own experience, and it's gorgeous. Stop trying to run from it, resist it, or cling to it, and just watch what arises and embrace it. He says, don't regret anything you've ever done, and stop blaming yourself once and for all. It doesn't matter. Stop blaming yourself. It was all for your highest good. Let it go. Hanging on to regrets and blame is the most selfish thing you can do. When giving them up would usher in a world of peace. Seriously, if you give up regrets and blame, you give up attacking yourself, and you turn and you love yourself. You love your heart. You love the you that's there. You will usher in a world of peace. And so when you cling to your regrets and blame, it's really very selfish of you to hang on. The world needs you to embrace and love yourself and love your experience. Verse 11, The choice now is not a choice to explore the why behind it or to look for remedies for the past. The choice now is whether you want suffering to continue or you want to abolish it for all time. And that's what it comes down to. You had enough suffering? You done now? Because if you're done now, let it all the past go. Let the blame go. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to go back and understand why you do this now because that happened to you then and blah, blah, blah. That was earlier. That was another time, another dimension. Where we are now, all we have to do is drop it and decide we're not going to suffer anymore. I'm going to love and embrace myself here, now. Verse 13, you are called to a life so new that you cannot even imagine it. And in verse 12, atonement or correction is not of you, but of God. Your body can correct or heal itself, and so can your mind and heart, if they are allowed to do so. In other words, you don't have to get in there with your fantastic brain and analyze up and down everything that's happened to you and everything that is happened to you and have the mind understand it. No, that comes from God. All your job is to get the obstacles out of the way so your mind and heart can heal itself. And then I love that he moves into this, because if you really dive into this, there's so much truth in it. Don't hang on to the past as if it were truth. The past is gone and nothing can be built on it. Now, he's not just talking about the past in the story of your life. He's talking about whatever happened in the last second. So we live our lives in this moment. And of course, this relates back to all of that powerful and wonderful work about the now, that we live in this moment in a place of don't know mind, a place of accepting whatever comes up, so that it's fresh and it's alive and it's new. When we only live this moment as it relates to past moments, we recreate the same thing. So we're being asked to live on the razor's edge right now and to just see this moment. Try it now and you'll see that it's true. If you see this moment, dropping all your definitions of what anything is, of where you are, what's happening with you, all of it, just drop it all. Anything that's based on the past. Stop defining anything and experience this moment as it is. What's in your field of experience right now? Now we are becoming new. And he ends this chapter with verse 13. We are writing a new first page, a new Genesis. It begins now. It begins with the rebirth of a self of love. It begins with the birth of Christ in you and your willingness to live in the world as the Christ self. There is so much in these words that could use a real deepening if you hold them. It begins with the rebirth of a self of love. So where this begins is how you love yourself. The energy that you are willing to take that light of love that you are, and you know how to love. You've loved people before, you love people now. Take that light, that complete acceptance, that unconditional love that is you, and turn it back on your own heart. And love yourself. Love the self that makes what we think of as mistakes. Love the self that has a chapter in the story that looks like it wasn't supposed to be there, but it was. Love the one in you that still resists. That's okay. Love that one too. Love the one in you that feels confused. Yay! I love that I'm feeling confused because that's what's coming up in my experience now. And I'm ready to embrace and love whatever is in my experience now. And what happens when you do this is revolutionary. It gives birth to a new self. And when you give birth to the new self, the Christ self, everybody else gets a piece of it too. So this is a really exciting place to be in. And I hope that you will take all of your energy and turn the light of love back to your own heart, back to yourself, and live as the Christ on earth. Thank you. I love you.